British lawmakers are running out of time to come up with a plan to leave the EU.
Parliament needs to ensure a smooth departure from the bloc by May 22nd, and it's unclear if that will happen or what will happen next. So for more on this, we want to bring in Nile Gardiner. He's Margaret Thatcher's former advisor, and he's with us from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us, Niall. All right, so...
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
When I heard that Theresa May offered to resign if they would just pass this thing, I couldn't tell if it was because when this is all over, she's going to be so sick of politics that it's a way for her to get out of it. Yeah, that she's like, please, I quit you. Or if she really thought that offering to resign would encourage people to sign her deal because maybe they're sick of her. I mean, can you just sort of walk us through that offer and why she thought that that would actually encourage people to get the deal done?
Well, it's a very good question. I think that the Prime Minister came to the conclusion that most of her own party really don't want her in power as Prime Minister anymore. And that includes, I understand, most of her own cabinet. And so I think that Theresa May's days as Prime Minister were anyway numbered. And in a last-ditch effort to secure support for her EU withdrawal agreement, she pledged to stand down ahead of the second phase of negotiations with the European Union. So I think this was the right move by the Prime Minister. I think her position was increasingly untenable. And certainly this is the only way possible that she might secure support for the EU withdrawal agreement. And already some of the senior Brexiteers, including Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg, have indicated that they will now support the deal. But there are about 20 Conservative MPs who are still against the deal, and also the 10 Democratic Unionist MPs also are opposing the deal as well. So I think that the vote tomorrow, if indeed it is held, if the Speaker agrees to hold the vote, I think it's going to be an extremely tight vote. And bearing in mind that the EU withdrawal agreement negotiated by Theresa May with the European Union is not a particularly good deal for the United Kingdom. It's a very weak, poor deal. It's deeply unpopular with their own party, but many MPs are going to take a deep breath and vote for the agreement just in order to get the UK out of the EU by May 22nd.
So now, after several failed attempts, what's causing so much division? You just spoke about it among Parliament that's leading to this gridlock among lawmakers with the EU.
Well, clearly, Parliament cannot agree on one particular way forward in the Brexit era, and we saw a series of indicative votes yesterday in the House of Commons. There was no majority support for any of those options, and we'll see tomorrow whether there is indeed a majority on the third attempt for Theresa May's EU withdrawal agreement. But I suspect tomorrow that the Prime Minister may well fall short on this vote. And the big issue, of course, with the EU withdrawal agreement is that the agreement ties Britain indefinitely to the EU customs union, and that makes it impossible actually for Britain to sign its own free trade agreements. That's the big sticking point for many Conservatives with this particular deal, and why it's so strongly opposed by many of the Brexiteers. But it remains to be seen what happens tomorrow, but I think it's going to be an extremely close and very tight vote.
You know, Niall, a few months ago when we talked about Brexit, the idea of a hard Brexit, exiting without an agreement, it seems sort of like, an unlikely occurrence, that something was going to happen and a deal would be worked out. But increasingly, it seems like an option that may actually play out. Do we have any idea what a hard Brexit would look like in the UK?
Well, I think there still remains a very real possibility of a hard Brexit, a no-deal Brexit on April the 12th, if Theresa May's deal does not go through. And what that looks like is that Britain basically immediately crashes out of the European Union, exits the single market and the customs union. There's no transition period in place, and Britain basically trades with the rest of the world under World Trade Organization terms. Now, there have been very detailed preparations in place, put in place by the British government. Also, every European Union country is preparing for a no deal, and the European Commission declared earlier this week that all preparations are in place for a possible no deal. So I don't think the sky is going to fall in if Britain leaves under a no deal. I think that it will largely be business as usual. There may be some temporary disruption in some areas, but I think that in the long term, Britain will do absolutely fine under a no deal, and the whole of Europe is preparing for that scenario. So it's not going to be the sort of disaster that many of its critics have warned.
Very interesting, Nile. Thank you very much. Nile Gardiner.
Well, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.